The 100 Dickhead Spring, a short story. Our hero finds the blush of spring brings with it a regrettable sociology. The tilted earth smells new. The bleaching sun has yet to flare out of the east with any savage vengeance. Traffic returns to the bypass. Schoolgirls dance with uncrafted commotion. Irises bob lethargic in the breeze, groovy and purple among the tender understory. Once the world gets the hang of it, it loves turning into spring. It wastes no time. It brings the wind. It stirs young bees from their hexagons. It is within this verdant rush and bright, clear mornings, the great clamour of the world remade, that our hero, Rigid Windsor, noticed the first proliferation of dickheads in his life. The winter's misery was being swept away. Pollen wafted over hilly suburbs humming with mowers. But on other fronts there was a burgeoning of folly, a great fumbling of green spring fools for all to contend. Dickheads everywhere. It seemed like most days he met a new one, and this went on until the gold cusp of summertime cradled the lip of the horizon and called an end to lime buds and smelly daffodils. Rigid, his name was Richard, but everyone pronounced it Rigid, except him, had his theories. They hibernate, hugging heaters, he surmised. But the minute the half-hearted sun illumines sinus falls of wattle dust in the scraggy scrub, and bolts of anxious onion weed start racing to the solstice, out they come, on the streets, in the supermarkets, and then increasingly at barbecues, parties and casual get-togethers. This spring, every time he stepped out his door he ran into a dickhead. There were dickheads at the garage, the coffee shop, the large print non-fiction section at the municipal library. There were swarms of them at the office of vehicle registration. Every time the phone rang, some dickhead on the line. He complained as such to his good friend sedentary Ray. "Ray," he says, "I'm surrounded by dickheads." Ray himself was often on the verge of becoming one and had to work hard to prevent it, but he'd noticed it too. "Everywhere this year," he agreed. He related that his old drinking buddy, Des the Kelvinator, had talked in terms of epidemics just that previous Tuesday night. There had been an altercation at the Bronze Wad Hotel. Some dickhead had lobbed a misdirected dart into the side of a patron's skull. So it wasn't just Rigid. An equinoctial glow had sent the chickweed rampant and florid. The winter's dreary night gave way to currajong songs and crocus flowers doing a slow tango in the pleasant dusks. Spring's dingle invoked the poetry of centuries, Wordsworth's Daffy and Percy Bysshe barefoot on the clover. Yet, by dint of the tracking constellations or merely sociological cycles, the proliferation of dickheads caught them all by surprise. Everyone has seen autumns full of idiots and winters full of wankers. This was 100 Dickhead Spring. It started with a trickle. One day on the train, Rigid sat next to a man who introduced himself as Honda Bill. "The name's Honda Bill. What's yours?" he overstated, effusive as dickheads do. "Richard," said Rigid. "How do you do, Honda Bill?" "Pleased to meet you, Rigid," said Honda Bill. They were racing down the city line, and our hero could see bristling spurs of the wilderness ash and buffalo grass blue with new nitrogen along the railway sidings and in the click-clack of neat backyards. There were red-breasted warblers making nest at the sunshine's invitation. Honda Bill, uncomfortably detailed, then began to explain why it was he was taking the train rather than living up to his name. He'd stranded the aforesaid Honda on a median strip at a no-turn section of the Eastern Thruway, trying to mount the curbs at an angle not only illegal, but in defiance of the known laws of proportion. He went on. It caused a traffic knell. 2 million workers were late to the office that day. In the end, the front wheels were on one side and the back wheels were on the other side, with the underbody of the car jammed against the pebbly rise. You know, he mused at the end of his tale, I was sure it was going to work. And there it was, the great catch cry of the dickhead. It seemed like a good idea at the time. There's no point in asking, but why? The true dickhead is defined by his entirely rancid attitude to the plainest common sense, and for this reason is slightly dangerous to be around. One day, without warning, he'll stick a metal fork in a power socket because his hairdryer has been lacking oomph of late. Otherwise, he's ordinary and amiable, if a bit slow. He's not quite a half-wit, has better manners than a tosser, and is considerably more tolerable than a jerk. But he's also unpredictable. He looks normal enough, but he has fatal lapses of judgment. He persists beyond the realms of prudence. Where a regular man will say, enough, leave it alone, the dickhead wants to poke at the sleeping snake one more time. He just can't help himself. Then, before you know it, you're 6 miles on a road in rough terrain nursing a snake-bitten hiker who's falling in and out of comatic delirium and is in danger of cardiac arrest. All you can do is turn to the dickhead with a stick, who's standing there looking genuinely surprised, and say, you bloody dickhead. In any case, this encounter with the now Hondaless Bill was followed by a series more, until in due course, as the youthful bees started gorging on the lad's-love hedge and fiascos of sparrows began carrying on in the cherry trees, it grew into a flood. Rigid pulled into a petrol station. The guy in the next car, clad in a lime-green blazer and mauve shirt, had the guzzler on auto, gas fumes galore, standing right below a red warning sign full of exclamation marks, yabbering on his volatile mobile phone. Can't you read the sign? Asked the rigid, intimating a massive explosion. Rather than being grateful, the stranger responded with exaggerated gestures of insertion and fecund expletives. Then, $30 later, the guy working the till had brought down the e-card network when he tried to loosen the printout device on the card swipe thingy with an unravelled paperclip. The dickhead. Standing in the queue, the TV in the upper grid, an astronaut in orbit talking about his favourite type of custard live on late-night cable. Gormlessly, he tips up a bowl and, quite naturally, obeying the obvious laws, the contents plop onto the front of his NASA jacket in a gooey, weightless mess. Dickhead's in space. As the springtime mists froth up out of the riverbeds, as the banks of Rosa rugosa grew sticky with moss and microscopic ferments roused by the renewed sunbeams hugging the breeze, it seemed Rigid's days were beset with dickheads, left, right and centre. Rigid later said to Sedentary Ray, "Is it something in the water, Ray? Is it something in the air?" "A dickhead is an idiot who has it on bold display," said Ray sagaciously. "What can you do? Lax and lolling daisies, grinning at a sky as blue as your basic cornflower, the groaning growth spurts of the peppercorn trees, carnivals of sprite flies crowding into the hoods of matronly digitalis, geckos on the sandstone edging, puddles wriggling with frog spawn, clouds of untidy fluff. But among Homo sapiens, during that merry earth turn, the subspecies Penis cranium prevailed. It was at a party in the midst of blooming October that Rigid encountered the prize dickhead of those tendrilled months. It was as though he was the epitome. There's always one. The night was rich with the scent of Maybloom and the distant drifts of rye and paspalum. The surrender monkeys were playing a set in the wide backyard. They had grown slightly famous playing anthems to doomed youth in the car parks of Ugly Reef. There was Liam on the bass and vocals, a heaven full of stars. There was Whitey on the keyboards, fire flits inflamed around the streetlight dim. Richie, the drummer, crickets gossiping about the lavender and the bobweed. James on the guitar, Fortune's missile and the luscious months of urging. It was Richie's girlfriend's sister's boyfriend's sister's 21st, the first raucous of the season. The dickhead's name was Latif, Latifa the falafels. He was Turkish. He was easily identified because, as our hero came to discover, he always wore a bright pink, light plastic puffy vest, a further keynote of the determined dickhead, epic bad taste. The band were there for the free drinks and the easy women. Latif, a social scientist, was there to study behaviour in the frisky clockwork of the dawning season. He rented down the road. There was a throb of beauty in the paddocks. Checks of street lanterns buzzed across the cityscape. A new breeze, a new yearning in the darkness. Latif's theory was that everybody is horny. Turkishly, he went about the party saying, "Hello, I'm Latif. Are you horny?" On some level, he thought it was funny. It was an experiment in breaching, a sociological tool developed by Garfinkel of California in his heyday. Latif specialised in everything. There wasn't a single subject in which he didn't have an elaborate opinion. Rigid watched him move from football to Olympic figure skating to Swedish politics to meteorology to the movies of Jimmy Stewart to nuclear physics to the last dribbles of Timothy Leary in a single conversation, making a thorough dickhead of himself in every instance. Unlike a smart-ass, it should be noted, this style of vociferous dickhead never insists he's right. He just goes on and on and on, and doesn't stop, even when it has become obvious that all his listeners have long ago decided he is bubbling pure crap and are watching just to see how long it goes. Rigid, in fact, arrived late, assiduously trying to avoid an intense young woman and her boyfriend Neville, a professional chicken throttler, the subject of another story. And within minutes, two people had come up to him and asked him if he knew who the dickhead in the pink vest was. He told them he had no idea. But after a first encounter with the vested one at the avocado dip, he was soon sidling up to strangers and asking, "Who's the dickhead in the pink vest?" Until eventually someone said, "Oh, him, that's Latif." Latif's Turkishness, let it be clear, was not in any way a contributing factor. In fact, in many respects, it made him rather handsome in a Central Asian nomadic horse-taming sort of way. But his personal attributes were lacking right across the board, and to a degree transcending all ethnic particularities. Of all the dickheads Richard met that lusty primavera, Latif took the cake. He approached the status of the hyper-dickhead, or the cockbrain, as they're popularly called. "Hello," he chimed at poor Rigid, getting acquainted. He had that lacking grace and radar for awkward moments that will sometimes beset the dickhead and that makes them hard to avoid in a crowded kitchen. Our hero noticed that others looked relieved that Pinky had found someone other than them to pester. Latif immediately related how he was in New York back at the time of Hurricane Katrina and how he'd been run over by a speedboat. What did that have to do with anything? Who knows? Dickheads don't need a reason. Perhaps, thought Rigid, he was claiming brain damage. "How did that happen?" Rigid asked incautiously. "Are you horny?" said the Turk. "What? I'm just asking people. Are you horny?" "How were you run over by a speedboat?" "It's an experiment," said the social scientist. "Are you horny?" "Not in the least," said Rigid. "How were you run over by a speedboat?" Latif finally explained that he had been water skiing. He shrugged his shoulders and added that there wasn't much else to do at the time. He had a tone of voice that said, if you'd been there, you would have been water skiing too. I don't understand, said Richard. Well, I was water skiing down St Charles Avenue when a speedboat full of Canadian rescue volunteers failed to give way at the crossroads and... You're water skiing where? Asked Richard. Lateef grinned inanely. It was a feature of his face. You were water skiing in Hurricane Katrina. Like Honda Bill, sheer folly. For some reason, dickheads love to tell you about the most stupid thing they've ever done. In Lateef's case, it was water skiing through the flooded streets of a famous natural disaster. The problem was that Richard believed him. Dickheads are too stupid to make things up. They have no reason to embellish. If Lateef said he'd taken to water sports, then he had. One might have asked, where did you get the water skis, or more to the point, who was driving the boat, or practical questions like that. But it's futile to search for dots to join together. The Turkoman just grinned inanely, and you didn't doubt him for a minute. Despite this story, however, Richard decided that Lateef wasn't a genuine case of the dreaded stunt dickhead. A stunt dickhead is the type of dickhead inclined to surf the roof of subway buses, or indeed kayak stormwater drains after 3 inches of rain. Water skiing through downtown New Orleans in the wake of Hurricane Katrina was certainly up there. But Richard felt that Lateef was a dickhead of another type again. You could smell his aftershave, woody and sour. He stood so close, Richard gained a terrible purview at the roots of his beard. Proximity was an issue with Lateef. It too was a defining feature. Late in the evening, an inebriated Maori caused a minor fracas when he suddenly said, "Look, bro, can you step back a bit?" And with a huge hand in the chest of the bemused Turk, still then prattling about his soggy days in the Big Easy. Somewhat later, another drinker had to be restrained after the social scientist, doing research, asked indelicate questions about the man's wife's views on erotic spanking. The true dickhead, like the social scientist, doesn't understand the idea of privacy. Stepping outside, the moon creamy and unblemished, golden brown moths reckless and slow, the wheeling of Orion across the velvet fields spotted with burning star clusters, Liam and James doing a sound check in the bonny air as more partygoers arrive. An acquaintance named Gavin sits down. "Who's the dickhead in the pink vest?" he asks straight away. "That's Lateef," says Richard. What was he doing in New Orleans? Somehow it emerged he'd been everywhere. Another feature of the authentic dickhead. They are invariably well-travelled. They've seen the sights and appreciated nothing. They've ruined Niagara Falls with bizarre observations and insulted the Taj Mahal, licking ice cream cones with noisy slobber in the Indian heat. The link between Spring's hearty fizz and a dickhead profusion are not obvious at first. What tides of teeming propagation draw them from their shelters back into the daily affairs of sensible men? 12 hours of night brimming with the tipping constellations, white Cygnus and the beams of blue Jupiter, the force that through the green fuse pushes untidy clumps of capeweed where they're totally unwanted. Whitey of the keyboards comes over. The irony is, he says, that the name Lateef means subtle. Another carload of revellers arrived. Bubbling bios in the rising saps of the wallflowers amused the busy nightjars. Midnight ants feasting where someone dropped a slice of birthday cake. The crisp ecliptic stratifying the overwhelming Australian sky. The speckled hoot owl in the wily ghost gum down beside the boat shed where the boys went to urinate away the beer and rum and cola. The realignment of the pole star, flagged by the Southern Cross. The earth, full of daisies again, nudged into the stark blackness. It was a beautiful night on the edge of a rural escarpment beyond which lies grazing lands pocked white with newborn lambs. The band came on and banged out a rendition of Get Me a Lawyer. Throughout, the Pink One stood in front of the crowd and showed everyone his dance moves. "Is he all right?" Ringet Windsor heard someone say. "Yeah, he's just a dickhead," was the reply. Finally, Latif demonstrated his genuine colours when, around a bleary 2 a.m, he decided to give a lesson in making his famous falafels. The hostess, Stephanie, mother of Richie's girlfriend's sister's boyfriend's sister, too polite, couldn't dissuade him. "Perhaps tomorrow, Latif," she said. "The kitchen's a bit messy and—" "Nonsense," said Latif. "It's clean enough. Just show me your food processor." It's broken. I'm sorry, Latif," she said, happy to find a reason to put the kibosh on his plan. Latif went to the cupboard. "No, it's not," he said, lifting it out. "It looks fine." "It's got a dodgy power cord," she protested. Latif grinned and disagreed. At this point, Whitey, topping up at the punch bowl between brackets, leaned Ridget's way and said quietly, "God, he's a dickhead." Ridget agreed. "All we need," said Latif, "is some chickpeas." "Damn," said Stephanie, "completely out of chickpeas." Latif emerged from the pantry with a big jar of them. "Found some," he said, grinning away and swaggering in his ever-conspicuous vest. It's very hard to discourage a dickhead. It should be added at this point, we've neglected to mention it thus far, that the offending pink vest had the unfortunate effect of making Latif's entire torso resemble the shaft of an erect penis, adding a special poignancy to the dickhead designation. It's hard to convey to the reader just how unfortunate this choice of garment really was. If he put on a bit of weight and shaved his head, the result would have been shockingly naturalistic. A small crowd of late revellers, including the birthday girl, stood around for the lesson as the band kicked up again outside doing Complicated Times as a final encore before the neighbours complained. After spilling the chickpeas everywhere and throwing it all together with baseless confidence, Latif became aware that he had an audience and quickly adopted the especially annoying manner of a midday TV chef. Falafels, he explained, launching a travelogue, are the native dish of his homeland and are the world's tastiest savoury. Then he went maniacal and flicked the blender into overdrive, giving it a throttle, at which the device vibrated insanely, and sure enough, the dodgy power cord came dislodged and landed in the yogurt. The chef was gormless. The next events happened as if in slow motion. Our hero, Rigid, was standing 5 or 6 feet away. The party was at large, people were moving through, a group of toothy girls had come back from cigarettes outside. Stephanie looked on quite helpless. The birthday girl seemed as bright and as innocent as Californian poppies. It was at this very juncture that, undeterred, Latif switched off the blender, flicking the setting to 0, and picked up the dodgy power cord, dripping with curd. What he had failed to do, of course, was turn off the blender at the wall, and blithely neglecting this most crucial of steps, mixing up his ends, the dickhead put the dodgy power cord in his mouth to suck away the yogurt with his temperamental relish. Boomph! An ozone of darkness descended. The music suddenly died. There was a flash of industrial blue. A streak of molten inertia zapped across the kitchen. The light bulb sparked. There was a horrifying crackle. The chemistry of electrons, yogurt, and human saliva intervened. "Hey!" someone shouted. After which there was dead silence. For a moment, Richard could hear the crickets extolling the warmth of the night time again, and the placid glow of the moon hanging above like a benevolent uncle with big bloated cheeks. A stinging scent of wasted voltage filled the room. In that long moment of broken instant, Richard reflected on the irony of the season and the fragility of man, and How we could build great civilizations but never outgrow folly. It was a moment in which to be philosophical in the passive sense. Sometimes the pitfalls of merely being overcome us. Then, "I'm okay," came the voice of the Turk in the sulphuric darkness. Yes, he was. Somehow, dickheads always are. The extended moment came crashing to an end and everyone unfroze. In a short while, someone found the trip switch and flopped the lights back on. Liam and the band rushed in to see what had happened. James had cooked his Stratocaster. From the yard, they could see that lights across the southern half had flickered out as well. The food processor had been reduced to a smouldering contraption. Stephanie lost her cool. "Latif, you fucking dickhead, I swear!" And she gritted her teeth and flew unfriendly at the permanent grin on his infuriating face. Rigid and two others had to intervene to hold her back. Latif couldn't understand why everyone wasn't overjoyed that he had survived a mortal brush. Rather than regular umbrage, he saw the event as another great adventure, blithely defying fate. Rather than stupidity, he saw it as an act of culinary dare. "Wow, did you see that?" he said. "You're a dickhead, Latif," someone explained and threatened to punch him out. When it was put to him that perhaps it was time he went home, he couldn't understand why. "Why?" he said. At which point, when reasoning with dickheads, the only recourse is to be firm and say, "Just because." Unquestionably, Latif of the falafels took the laurels for the season's dickhead grand. There was plenty more beyond his pink ilk all the same. It was just that he was quite outstanding, but as Sedentary Ray did say, everywhere this year. In a tragic incident at another birthday do on the far side of town, some dickhead lighting his farts gave a pretty girl third-degree burns to 80% of her body. Beware the dickhead when he sets out on a party trick. Rigid had seen Easter times full of brown noses and Yuletides full of arseholes. Who hasn't? But throughout the whole extension, as the planet rolled over and north and south changed shift, and at other parties, breakups, soirees, the like of Latif infected the whole social ecology of the land. The tilted earth smells new, the bleaching sun is still somewhat restrained. Once the world gets the hang of it, it loves turning into spring and goes about it with an eager slobber. The bees, drunk on honey, go back and tell the queen bee that she's lovely. Even so, Rigid Windsor was looking forward to the summertime. Dickheads congregate at the pool in the summertime. You can avoid them if you don't go swimming. Sedentary Ray, however, old-fashioned in his views, related that he'd once known an entire summer of 1,000 poofters. "Don't get me started on that," he said. Summer would tarry anon, the stark bands of shadow, the decisive sun, the withering horizon line, the dusty distances, the washed-out blue of the endless heaven, the dry land, brown and beige and coffee and straw, sedate in the long, long siesta of the year.